Welcome to the next episode of the CAPB Podcast. I am really humbled and honoured to have Jonny Ball. He is a co-founder of the Afghanistan Veterans Community. Welcome, Jonny.
Delighted to be here. No, and well done, lads, on what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. So, Jonny, obviously you've listened to the podcast. You're an avid listener. We like to celebrate the success of what veterans are achieving post-service. Some of the previous guests on the podcast are still serving and doing amazing things, setting themselves up to get out. So just as a start for 10, give us a highlight / overview whistle-stop tour of your military career.
Well, I've just become a veteran for the second time in my life. I first joined my local infantry regiment, the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, England's most senior infantry regiment of the line, when I was a lad, following the footsteps of both my grandfathers on either side of the family. And I was really proud of my local regiment and served in West Belfast and Drumcree in the late 90s. So I was actually on the ground as an 18-year-old when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. So it was a really formative experience, and I was very fortunate to have an amazing mentor, my section commander, Andy Shaw, someone whose name I've mentioned countless times. I must track him down. But he really taught me how to be streetwise, how to soldier. And but I had bigger dreams of wanting to be an infantry platoon commander and go for my commission. So off I went to university, and during that time was in the Officers Training Corps, was a platoon commander in the OTC, and did Cambrian patrol and all that good stuff. I was mega keen. But unfortunately, my dreams came crashing down around me in my final year. Well, I went off to the regular commissions board and spectacularly failed it. And was also told I was going to have a bar on entry into the military because I had psoriasis. And I was absolutely dumbfounded. I was devastated. I waved all my mates off to Sandhurst. Have a nice time. And don't forget, this is in 2001. 9/11 was just about to happen. So the world was about to change for all of us. And the most critical kind of handover from the Cold War and Northern Ireland to this new era of soldiering. So I was left devastated. So I had to find something else to do. So I went off and did, my friends call it the wilderness years. And I was a holiday rep in Magaluf. I was a ski rep, pre-camera phones, I have to say. And I had a really good time. But what I had within me was this yearning to serve again. So when I came home after all that mucking around, whilst my friends were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, I went into politics and started working for members of parliament. I had no background. I'm from a working class background, didn't know any politicians, and continued to serve again in my community as an MP's assistant, to put it loosely, fighting elections, using some of those skills that I'd gained in the military, and really took to that and started to go up with the greasy pole of internal politics. But there was something that just couldn't leave me. And that was the desire to serve my country. So whilst serving in politics in London, I went and knocked on the door of my local reserve unit, which happened to be the Intelligence Corps, said, "Hey, this is me. How's about it?" Afghanistan was at its height at the time. And I said, look, I'd failed a medical. They went, "Oh, don't worry, rules have changed." And before you know it, you end up somewhere hot and sandy pretty quickly after that conversation. So that then embarked a 16-year career in the Intelligence Corps, highlights of which include serving in Afghanistan as a Pashto military linguist, where I gained a Commander Land Forces commendation, working on the ground training the Afghan National Police. Sadly, I lost a classmate during that time, Squadron Leader Downing, someone's name I always remember and mention when I can. And then came back, went through the whole career courses, was an instructor at 𝐠𝐿𝐴𝐻, training officers, senior NCOs, and junior soldiers to be the next generation of intelligencers. And it was during that time that my world came crashing down again, and I had a motorcycle accident. And it took 7 surgeries to save my leg over a 4-year period, where I also suffered a mental health injury too, a D-glove of my leg, so similar to an IED injury. So our muckers and the amazing your muckers from the Royal Army Medical Corps and the advances they made in saving limbs to save my limb, albeit cutting about on a Harley Davidson and not treading on the ground in Helmand. And that had a happy ending, which was the Invictus Games, where I represented our country once again and gained a medal in powerlifting, and also captained the indoor rowing team, and got back on a bike. Having been knocked off a bike, I got back on a one without a motor, and got back cycling again. So there is a happy ending to that tale. But I'm now mentally discharged as a result of all of that.
Jonny, I mean, that's your adversity and your passion to serve from being knocked down. A lot of people may have been knocked down in that initial stage and gone, not for me, chef, and done something else. But that willingness to serve, and then for you to end up in the ground in Afghanistan with your colleagues, and I imagine that when you rejoined and when you were in and when you were serving and deploying, whether you had the opportunity to cross paths with some of those people who you OTC with. But it's a really interesting thing you speak about with the Invictus Games. We had Mark Ormrod on, and obviously Mark Ormrod, the surviving triple amputee, Royal Marine, he said about the Invictus Games that when he was injured and he was rebuilding his life and all the rehabilitation, that the Invictus Games gave him the opportunity to wear a uniform, wear the Union Jack again. And I think that's I loved watching the Invictus Games, still love it. And a very close friend of mine just qualified to go to Canada, actually, in around 4 weeks. But I just think it's amazing. And to listen to your experiences of it, how it had a happy ending and you medalled, and I think it's fantastic, mate.
It really did. And actually, I had the pleasure of meeting Mark at Dusseldorf in the Invictus Games, where he came over, he put the shirt back on again, stood beside us. There was no airs or graces. He's a big deal within our community, but he was stood there with our uniform on, part of our team. So with that, I actually owe Mark a debt of gratitude, because when I was laying in that hospital bed and I was listening to podcasts, trying to get some answers, I was very confused. I was uncertain about my future. I was facing amputation. They saved my leg, luckily, but through some hard work and the wonders of technology and science. But I was trying to find answers in podcasts, and I was listening to Mark's story, actually, in his audiobook. And it was his story that inspired me to go forward for the Invictus Games eventually. At the time, I didn't think it was me. I didn't know where I was in my life. But when it was time to apply for it, I remembered the inspiration of Mark. I thought, well, maybe I'll inspire someone else who might be lying in a hospital bed right now. So, which is why I'm so passionate at telling the story of Invictus.
That's great, mate. I mean, your story in itself is it's a podcast. It's an episode in itself. Delving in, it's amazing what you've overcome and where you are now. I want to ask about what is the Afghan veteran community? What is it about? What does it do for the listeners that don't know what's there and what's available?
I think without my injury, I wouldn't have had the idea for the Afghan veterans community, if I'm honest. I really struggled through my mental health, as I explained. And as a result of my injury, I was getting support from my mental health. And it was during a period of counselling that Op Herrick happened, and that catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. And for many of us, we struggled, right? We were struggling with the people we'd left behind. I was an interpreter, so I was working with children in Afghanistan, rebuilding schools, working very closely with Afghans. So I took it really personally. And it was during that time of Op Herrick that the Falklands generation were actually celebrating and commemorating their 40-year anniversary. That same generation that inspired me to serve. The first veteran I ever met was the school caretaker in primary school, Mr. Webb, a Falklands War veteran, legend of a bloke, and he used to tell us stories. And they were celebrating. They had this identity, the scarves they wear at remembrance that binds them across the services, across whatever part they played in that amazing regaining of the Falklands. And I was actually out with a mate of mine who's still serving Lieutenant Colonel, funny enough. And we were out on the piss in London, and we were we'd been go karting, and we were on the Thames Clipper ferry. And we were talking about this, and we were talking about Afghanistan and how heartbroken we were about it. And we both looked at each other and said, where's our association? Inspired by the South Atlantic Medal Association. And that was really where the seed was planted for the Afghan veterans community. So over a period of 3 years, we've been doing a hell of a lot of listening. I work in this sector. I've worked for numerous charities. I work for Mission Community, which is part of Mission Motorsport in my day job. And I've worked for the Forced Employment Charity. I've worked for the MOD on the Covenant. And I've seen people make a whole heap of mistakes when it comes to setting up these organisations. Well-intentioned, but they just don't do the good old-fashioned J2, the intelligence. Find out, understand what your community, the wants and needs. So anyone looking at business, understand your target audience. So through my little black book, I've got quite a good one, through politics and through industry, we managed to garner the support of M&C 𝐯𝐚𝐥𝐿 World Services, who are a best-in-class research and insights agency. And we went to them and said, and we've been on a lot of lunches and a lot of coffees, and this was part of that. And they said, we can offer you some insight support, some research, put a team to this. So we did some focus group work, and every veteran that came to a focus group was paid. A lot of those veterans actually gave that money to charity afterwards, because I believe if we value our veterans, then we need to show that and demonstrate it in our actions. Stop taking the piss out of veterans. If you want a veteran to go and speak in your organisation, pay them. All right. If you value them, don't just think you can get it for free. So our approach has to be the same culturally. And we then did a survey, and 𝐯𝐚𝐥𝐿 said, well, in order to understand this community, it's 150,000 served in Afghanistan. We need at least 400 responses to a survey. I said, hold my beer. Without any advertising budget or anyone to really push it out there, apart from me and my mate, Matt, we got nearly 1,600 responses. It's the largest survey of Afghan veterans that's ever been conducted independently. And government, we've shared this with them. We launched the report in Parliament just before Christmas in 2024. We've got the support of the Veterans Minister, 𝐸𝐿, himself an Afghan veteran with an MC, no less. And we've been to the charities, Royal British Legion. So I think at the start of this, it was important from that idea on a Thames Clipper ferry of saying, well, we've got a really good idea, with a couple of beers down the range, to actually taking a step back, applying some of those lessons, what we do in operations around getting that J2 intelligence picture, and really considering this, because this is too important to cock up. We have 150,000. We had 457 that paid the ultimate sacrifice and their families. And if we pitch this in the wrong way, so we've been strategically patient, then it could be devastating for this community. And you only get one shot at a launch. So in 2024, 10-year anniversary at the end of Op Herrick, we were able to be part of the commemoration because of all that networking, because of my black book, because of Matt and his experience working in a MOD main building. We were right in amongst it for the commemoration during the National Memorial Arboretum. There was a Remembering Afghanistan event. We've got a Padre Claire. She served on Herrick 15. She co-delivered the service. We had a wreath with our logo on it. And myself and Matt co-laid the wreath just behind the Veterans Minister. And I thought, I'm just a buckshy bloke. Here I am in amongst the great and the good, representing the community. And then for the first time in our history, on remembrance, 60 of us marched with our 𝐠𝐮𝐥𝐿𝐲 scarves past the cenotaph, literally in the footsteps of that South Atlantic Medal Association generation who I mentioned, who had inspired us to do this in the first place.
I think, mate, it is incredible, and it's crazy to think that it was Herrick was finished 10 years ago. That's what's crazy. So Paul and I both served in Herrick. When we've had most of the veterans we've had on the podcast, when we talk about highlights of their career, they talk about the tours. And these are, infantry soldiers, Royal Marines officers who talk about the tours. And arguably, and I served for 23 years, the tours
all right, mate, we've all done stuff.
Highlight. Say again, sorry? Yeah,
all right, we've all done stuff.
Yeah, we have. Paul was a post NCO, but hey, I don't hold that against him.
6 weeks, mate. Come on.
But it was like, it is the tours, and it's the tours, those difficult times, You have, they're also the worst times that you deploy. And I think the fact that it was 10 years ago, and 2024 was a crazy year there's a number of things happened about the Afghan veterans community. So the first thing was, I saw on LinkedIn, I thought, I'm going to fill in the survey. It's important because it's important to bring, like you said, lots of Afghan veterans who maybe only served for 5 years, served for 20 years, whatever, you deployed, probably feel that did what we do in Afghanistan, did we make a difference? Was it worth it? you know? And that's a question that some people struggle with. Other people said, well, I was doing it for the people to the left and right of me. And then there was a documentary, which you've probably seen on BBC, about the Welsh Guards. And I thought it was fascinating. And I thought it was fascinating to watch it and see that, like how they feel now. And some of the conversations with some of the wives, like really, really were like, you know, pivotal stuff. And one of the things I might have mentioned on the last podcast, where one of the wives couldn't understand how her husband, who was a troop sergeant at the time, had more loyalty to people who weren't his blood. So he'd come back from tour injured and was like, he was just desperate to get back deployed. And I think that for me almost encapsulated military service. It was like, I can't explain it, but that's how you feel if you miss out on something and your people deploy. And then, as I say, remember, people deal with remembrance in different ways. People do remembrance in different ways. And for me, I like to watch it on telly, mate. I like to sit down and watch it on telly. And when I saw you on getting interviewed by the BBC and saw all those Afghanistan veterans, Sally Orange, a friend of the podcast, has been on, wearing the 𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐻𝐢𝐳, it was like, this is huge. This is a huge achievement from you, but it's also huge for the Afghan veteran community, for the military people who served in Afghanistan. So just a massive shout out, Jonny. It's what you and Matt have done is incredible, mate.
Thank you, mate. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, as you spoke there and talking about the Welsh Guards piece, the hairs on the back of my neck were going up. My claim to fame is actually I was asked by Points of View to give my assessment of the programme. Whee! Life goals. But in all seriousness, I mentioned the data, but behind that are the stories of the individuals. Every day I'm opening up emails from veterans who are talking about this for the first time. It's almost as if we've given them permission to take ownership of their story, to be proud of it. I'll be honest, there was a sense of shame. Some of the stuff that came out of the focus groups, I was listening in on the cans, and we were hearing stories of shame from leaders as well, senior people. And it was very hard to listen to, but I understood why. And that's because of the political dynamics of our withdrawal. But what we've been able to do by giving people the license almost to talk about their individual stories was reinstall a sense of pride. Let's remove the politics for a second. But how did we behave? How did we act? What do we achieve in our kind of microclimates on the ground with our muckers, our brothers and sisters to the left and right of us? I'm very proud of that. No one's going to take that away from me. So what I'm reading is a sense of pride again. People I embraced by looking at my photos for the first time in probably a decade because I wanted to use them for the promotion of the Afghan veterans community. So people are starting to reconcile. And with that comes their identity of being a veteran, what it means to be a veteran, you know, a young veteran in this day and age. So I'm very proud of that too. And to hear you talk about what it did for you, seeing us march past the cenotaph, I mean, it's no mean feat. There was a lot of conversations with the RBL, a lot of stuff behind the work, a lot of admin. And that actually came from the veterans community. I reached out to an amazing guy at the RBL called Chris Dodd, ex-PWRR. I never served with Chris, but he knows some very good friends of mine. And I got in touch with him for some advice about this. And he gave me that kind of blueprint of how to engage with the RBL. And as a result of that, we were at the NMA for the 10-year anniversary event, laying a wreath. And then we were marching past the cenotaph with General Patrick Sanders at the head of our parade. I served under him. He's the soldiers general, and he serves as our patron. And he led us out the front. And for me, that was one of my life's most proudest moments, to be there with my muck and Matt, and to our left and right friends. And the other thing I'll be honest about is on the Saturday night in London in a travel lodge in Vauxhall, I wanted to be anywhere else apart from there. I just wanted to be at home with my family. Didn't want to be there. But I had a responsibility to this community. And then the following day, tramping across London with carrier bags full of 𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐻𝐢𝐳. I can tell you 60 𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐻𝐢𝐳 in a bag weigh a ton. Seeing people turn up at the RV, hugging each other, putting 𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐻𝐢𝐳 around their necks. A general, literally on the same level as a private soldier. Our 𝐸𝐿SE pensioner, Bill, turning up and just really adding something to that. I stood back and went, there's no other place I want to be, which is right here now with this community. So I'm really proud of what we achieved already.
I think there's something else that for me there's two things, and I think it's poignant to talk about it. The first thing was remembrance in itself. Now, as I say, joined in 1998. Paul joined a short time after. And back in the day when I joined, remembrance was an inconvenience. I'm not going to lie to you, it was an inconvenience because you couldn't really relate to it. It was all First World War, Second World War, and it was important. Poppies were important, sacrifices of those who stood before us. But it's like we were so far removed from Normandy, so far removed from the Somme, it was difficult to relate to it. And then Iraq and Afghanistan happened, and people we'd served with died, people I treated died, people I trained died. And then you talk about those deployments, and remembrance made changed its whole dynamic for me. And I think, do you know what I mean? And Paul and I talk about this a lot. Very quick dip for you. There was a time when Paul and I, on one of our deployments crossed over. So we were in Iraq at the same time, right? Ugh. So Paul was coming in, I was going out, and we had about a month where we were in theatre at the same time. Now, I'm not talking Saving Private Ryan vibes, but we were in a coffee shop within Basra, having a brew, and we got mortared while we were playing chess, right? So we hit the deck, underneath, helmets on, body armour on, underneath the table in this coffee shop, and Paul reached up and brought the chessboard underneath the table, right? So the alarm was going off, phalanx was going off, and Paul and I continued our game of chess while we were in Iraq. And it was like, and it's little memories like that Paul and I just relate to, you know? But I think the remembrance really focusing on relating to it was important. And the second thing was when I watched you on telly, and I saw the 𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐻𝐼, which we can all relate to. All of us can relate to the 𝐠𝐠𝐴𝐺 you get issued. And I kept mine and wore it. That was my warm kit. It was my hot wear. It was everything. And I've still got it in the loft. And it's like, to see everyone marching that, it made me think, maybe I could march at the cenotaph with Afghan veterans. Maybe that's a bucket list thing. And it made it almost like that would be a big deal. Whereas before it's just an interesting one. It was like, you know, I couldn't see myself marching with the REMC Association because I can't relate to all those people. But whereas the Afghan veteran community, I can relate to those people because I've deployed with most of those people. Yep. I get it. Do you know what I mean?
The same. It's that. It's like that. This brotherhood of we've all been in that theatre. We've all understood how beautiful that country is. It's the most greenest place I've ever been to, and I still speak to the lads today. We still have a troop WhatsApp group, like lads that are in, lads that are out. I mean, we all served on Herrick 14. It was quite a exciting, shall we say, a tour of what we did. Our main job was to route proof, clear IEDs for the transit of troops on foot and for resupplies. And I go back to when you said, like, when people ask me at the time, when they asked me, there was none of this politics. It never entered my head. It was like, I'm doing it for them, but I'm also doing it for the local populace as well, because we're clearing this stuff out so then the kids can play in the streets and things like that. And it wasn't long, I think it was about 2 years ago, a work colleague of mine asked me, was it worth it? And with having that years, I think I was out by I've been out about 10 years by then, and obviously grown up and matured a bit and learned a little bit more about life. The answer was still the same. But when they started pushing, like, well, what do you think? And I was like, I can only answer from what I felt at the time. And at the time, I was doing that job, that role to help and support. And that was my main focus. I never got into the politics of it, because it was like, in the military, you go and do your job. And you go, okay, I'll go and do my job. I'm here to save people. I'm here to build a bridge. I'm here to build a school. I'm here to, clear this route, make sure that the soldiers at the other end of the PBs on the, out on the canal get fed, that kind of stuff. It's not like I'm doing this for a political. It was so far removed from why I felt I was there. And seeing the 𝐯𝐚𝐥𝐮𝐞𝐬, sadly I lost mine, which I'm a bit gutted about. But when I saw it, I instantly was like, and I've got pictures. There's a picture of me looking clean shaven, very younger. I had a head of hair, and there's a picture of me next to a mastiff, and I'm got my 𝐯𝐚𝐥𝐻 on, and I was just like, and it's the smell for me. So when I saw them, when I saw you marching at the cenotaph, I was just like, instantly, Afghan. And then I was like, who are these guys? And then I heard it, and I was like, LinkedIn. Oh, follow straight away. And I thought, this is amazing. So it did bring back memories of. Remembrance always brings back memories for me of kind of solemn times, but also happy times as well. When I think about my career and think about the lads I served with, and sadly the lads that aren't here anymore, a couple of friends of mine, and I celebrate more to the point than I remember, and I celebrate as well because it was such a turning point in my military career. Serving in Afghan, it was probably one of the best and worst operational tours I've ever been on. So seeing that and seeing the community, I was just like, yeah, it was like a belonging. I felt like I could be heard because you speak about veterans, and we're all kind of in this one thing. And when you say I served in Afghanistan, it's like, oh, right, okay. But now there's like a community where you go, look, it's not celebrating. I don't know what it is, but it's like,
we call it commemoration. It's our third pillar. And I mean, you've brought something up there, is that the homogenization of veterans. We need to be more sophisticated than that. There are individual characteristics within the term veteran. First of all, we need to be comfortable with the term veteran. It's no mistake. It's in our name, veteran. We've got to own it, take responsibility for that. The second point that you made, talking about those individual stories and actually giving value and acknowledging those individual stories and respect to those, that's what we seek to do. Our vision is to provide that platform to give acknowledge every single individual story and the sacrifices of service that we gave during that time. And the other point as well is the contemporary nature of remembrance and commemorations, because like you say, Matt, this is personal. It's not so distant. These are people that we knew and loved, that we talk about still. And unless we take responsibility as our community, unfortunately, there are irresponsible forces within the community or the media who would do it for us. So one of the things I was frustrated about was seeing people being rolled out on some of the emerging media programs, or even BBC and Sky News, who served 20, 30 years ago and longer, who were talking about contemporary issues that they might not necessarily had insight into, particularly when it came to Afghanistan, because the media are lazy. They'll just see rank, former major, and they'll think that's a massive big deal. Was actually be a bit more sophisticated. If we can be a credible, authoritative voice around Afghanistan and build those relationships with media, and our first pillar is communicate, then they can come to us and say, hey, Radio 4, Women's Hour, want to do a piece on Afghanistan. Do you know any female veterans? Well, funny enough, 10% of those that responded to our survey were women. Yes, we do. And 25% of those that marched on remembrance were women too. So yeah, we do. What do you want to talk about? Do you need a 𝐠𝐮𝐥𝐻 crew person? 𝐷𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐻𝐢𝐳. I can talk to her. Do you need a medic, a physio or a medic? Sally Orange. We've got these people in our community that we know. So it's taking some responsibility, because that generation, this is the important difference between veterans as well, is the generation that inspired us, apart from Mr. Webb, my school caretaker. The community back then, when we were kids, they knew veterans through the lens of remembrance, because there were even First World War veterans and Second World War veterans. The likelihood of ordinary folk in business or in society meeting a veteran is pretty slim, because it's a small armed forces and only 15,000 on average leave every year. So guess what? It's our responsibility to actually represent brand veteran through things like the Afghan veterans community and podcasts like this. Podcasts like this might be the first contact that someone in the civilian community has with someone that served. So that's why I'm so passionate supporting your podcast and others, is because that will present Brand Veteran to UK civil society. And if we can create a better empathy, not sympathy, for this community, then civil society, be that in politics, my old world, and I spent a lot of time for an organisation I formed called Campaign Force, and my own podcast, Veterans in Politics, to inspire veterans to stand up and serve again in their communities, or in industry and business. If we can create that empathy by being good brand advocates of Brand Veteran within our own constituent parts, then the nation can have and reconcile what it means to be a British veteran, not a watered down American veteran, and actually then take hold of this national strategic asset that we have staring at us in this face, which is a working age population of veterans, people like us who are doing good things in civil society.
I think that's one of the things, I think it's incredible, mate. And there's two things I just want to touch on. First of all is the veteran community is an incredible force multiplier in business. And also from what we've experienced in the podcast, and we've had all services on, all ranks, who have took their skills and what they've took from their military service into business and are making a difference, and they're not asking for that helping hand. And I really like what you said about empathy and not sympathy, because we don't want to, you want just a bit of understanding that sometimes it's going to be quite difficult. Sometimes that we are going to react different ways, and we might need to relearn things from one career to another. And I think that's a really pertinent point. And the second thing, you talk about your pillars and communication. I love the vehicle that you've created. I love having the idea of having this place where we can be heard. And I think linking to what some of the other stuff you talk about the mental health, we lost a lot of soldiers and officers in Afghanistan, and we've lost a lot since, maybe because of Afghanistan. And some people, it might be because they didn't have a support network, they didn't have a voice, they didn't have that community that you're building where they could just lean in a little bit. And I think that's something that, again, whether it's the main driver or whether it's certainly a Charlie Fire team to what you're delivering, I think it's incredible, mate. I really do, Johnny. I think it's something that's come at exactly the right time.
It absolutely is, and it's reassuring hearing you say that, because without community, I might not be stood here. Without a fellow veteran, peer-to-peer, Tom Fox, shout out, mate, thank you very much. I'd already been through therapy, I'd already been through CBT twice, but actually I was in a really dark place, sat in this very room, crying to myself, not really understanding why, being very confused, and being really in a really dark place, that he was able to reach out to me, check in on me, and then I was able to access Op Courage, which is amazing, by the way, for anyone listening, to access the mental health support for veterans that's available. And that got to the root of my trauma through EMDR therapy. And that's a whole other episode to talk about. But what I believe is that by creating communities that I experienced through Invictus, where I refound myself again from this sense of community, it wasn't necessarily the sport. I mean, I fizzed hard. I fizz every day, still do, as that habit. And that's another part of my maintenance of mental health. But it's through community. A lot of Afghan veterans are in that cohort from 21 different nations as well, where no one didn't find a single victim in that cohort of hundreds of people that had every right to think they were victims, whose life had dealt them a difficult hand. And I have a long-term health condition, psoriatic arthritis, as well as my lower limb injury and my mental health injury. But I'm not a victim. I made a choice that day. I've made a choice to serve. I made a choice to go on my motorbike that day. And I've made a choice to seek help too, that's been made readily available. There's so much help available. And I needed some help. And community help was that guiding hand along the way there. I couldn't do it on my own. Resilience comes from community. It's not something you can do on your own. Go through basic training, you build up your resilience because you're part of that team, that cohort. And that's where your resilience comes from. So I do believe that the Afghan veterans community can serve as a public health initiative almost, because one of our ideas for the future is to, and this is what the community have asked for in our research, is that they want more stuff available for mental health. Well, there's stuff available there to communicate that to them. I think that's half the battle from a trusted source like us. But what if we were to upskill people from mental health, buddy awareness? So there's some early work that we've started around looking at how we might be a vehicle to upskill the community to look after each other. And we know that there's a lot of courses. I've done mental health first aid myself, for example, which helped me. So it has an enormous amount of potential to prevent some of the places that some individuals might go to. And I'm probably in that bucket myself. But I'm a high functioning individual now, thanks very much. And that came from community and accessing the help that was made readily available to me.
Mate, honestly, it's the more I hear, the more it just inspires you, and it makes you, not acceptance. What's the word? Yeah, maybe acceptance. Maybe acceptance that it's all right. It was okay to serve. It was okay what we did in Afghanistan. It's okay it's okay to be upset about stuff that's happened since. It really is inspiring. Jonny, we could talk to you all night. But the idea is, as I say, try and keep the podcast a little bit short. We've just got two little things we'll talk about and ask. So the first one I would say is, what's next for the Afghan veterans community? What's on the horizon?
For the Afghan veterans community, we're going through the Charity Commission process, which is robust, as you'd expect. That's been really good. I've learned a lot about corporate governance. We've built a board that has as our patron, General Patrick Sanders, has a former CEO of Headley Court, Teresa Griffiths, to our Padre Claire, to captains of industry, to a serving general, General 𝐩𝐫𝐢𝐧𝐠, to a lawyer, and many others that form this amazing corporate governance hub. And we're really proud of the people we brought together. So the next stage is to get registered as a charity. And we've not actually launched. We've achieved so much brand awareness, building a community, the largest survey of veterans. But that survey told us that 92% of veterans fear they will be forgotten. So that's the challenge that's been set to us. And we can't let that happen. We've got to learn lessons from the past. So we take that. We've got the evidence in that report. We presented it to Parliament. So we will be going out there to the third sector to collaborate. We're not going to replicate, duplicate. We're going to collaborate, look at how we can work for this community and make them naturally access the services that are readily available. We're also going to launch this thing in the summer. So stand by on that. And we want to have fun as well, because we're a different cohort. Yes, we do like to have a drink, but actually we like fizz. We like coffee, and I know you've spoken about coffee brands on your show as well. And we still like to get outdoors. So I'm a firm believer of getting people outdoors, using that experience I had from Invictus, getting people together outdoors through physical activity, getting people talking, creating safe spaces is what they've asked us. Be they online or be they in person, so we can really make the most of this community. Because by doing so, once they go back out to their communities, and we don't want to make this ghetto of a community, but they've got to go back out to their communities and do great things in society and business. We've got this virtuous insurgency. We spent years fighting insurgency. Let's create our own. These are good people, 150,000 veterans and their families, and the Afghans that have resettled in this country too, and the civil servants. I call it a virtuous insurgency. By God, does this country need it at the moment? It lacks a moral component to leadership in this country. That's not a party political point. It's a talent point, be that in society, in business and politics. So we have so much potential to make the most of this servant leadership community so that they can go out there and do great things. So we're really excited, but I want this to survive us, just like the South Atlantic Medal Association. And as the Normandy Veterans Association celebrated and commemorated 80 years last year, well, in a few decades' time, I want my little girl to be pushing me in my wheelchair down past the cenotaph and remembering back to 2024 when we marched for the first time in our history.
Mate, it's brilliant, mate.
I just want to just put a point out here, right? I've been very quiet during this podcast, right? Not asking much, right? Or speaking about. I have just been solely intently listening to you, Jonny, and the amazing work this community can do. So it's amazing, and I'm almost, you'd be surprised to know, I'm almost kind of like lost for words for what your passion and the passion that how can I say that? I kind of feel it now, just talking about it. I feel really passionate. The passion that you bring and you drive, not only to sort of highlight and sort of bring to the forefront the Afghan veteran community, but the veteran community in itself, right? And I'm like, so I'm looking at my medals now, and I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm a veteran. Yeah, fuck yeah, like, and when it's before, I'd be like, yeah, I'm a veteran. Yeah, I served my time, type of thing. Now I'm like, I've got this feeling here, and I'm just like, I feel really fucking proud right at this moment, and I think it's testament to what you were saying, Johnny. It's just like, I'm like, shit, yeah, it's almost, it's weird, mate. It's almost like you've kind of like flicked something, and I'm like, fuck yeah, like I am really proud actually. I did serve my time for my country, and that's the reason why I did serve my country. I wanted to. It makes me happy. It makes me reassurance, and it makes me really proud to actually recognise that sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't recognise that we're actually veterans. We just, yep, that's the part of my life, blah blah blah. But sometimes we actually do need to look back and go, actually, yeah, what I've done for my country is proud, and I'm really proud to do that. So thank you on a personal note. Thank you for that, Johnny. It's much appreciated, buddy.
Oh, mate.
I think, Paul, that's solid. I think one of the things, Johnny, is the way you articulate it, the way you articulate service, the way you articulate community, the way you articulate what your community stands for. I mean, sometimes, like Paul and I say, we just grew up in North Wales, mate, normal school. We both joined the army at 16. Do you know what I mean? We're not educated, but it's like when listening to you talk about it, it makes me want to dig my deserts out, mate.
Oh, guys, honestly,
it's quality,
that's beautiful.
Mate. It really is.
Well, I think everything you've just said vindicates and explains our why. This is exactly why we're doing it. In fact, we went to number 10, again, one of those what am I doing here moments, with a group of veterans to meet the Prime Minister and the Veterans Minister. And one of the guys, I won't mention his name, but he stood next to me and he nudged me and said, Johnny, it's the first time I've ever worn my medals. And he felt really proud of it. I was like, and I told the Veterans Minister this, and they had this moment. It was like a beautiful moment. It was the minister was like, Minister, you've got to go this way. They were his advisors. He was like, no, I'm here with one of my own. Held him in his arm, looked him in the eye. He was like, always be proud of your service. And it was this moment. I thought, we've made that, we've helped that, but this individual has found that in himself to take responsibility for his service. It wasn't me saying you must wear your medals. He made that decision. We've just given him the space and the license to be able to make that decision himself. And that's what's important. So I guess one of the last things to mention is let's not apologise for being veterans. It's very British. No. All right. We're not going to apologise. We've got a bit of a brand thing we need to do to explain who we are so that people say the word veteran. They don't, God bless them, the Chelsea pensioners and the World War II generation. Well, guess what? That baton's being handed over to us. The youngest Falklands War veteran is 61. I spoke to Tom, who I saw at Remembrance, and said, well, I told you we'd be here at the Cenotaph. And he's like, well done. We're following their footsteps. Their youngest veteran is 61. Our youngest is 21 from Pitting. All right. So it's our responsibility to take that veteran baton, own it. Don't apologise. We need to stop using passive language. In industry, we are an asset. Okay, be humble, absolutely, but be responsible with that narrative too. Don't expect people to feel sorry for you. Don't be victims. Be valued. Make those decisions. And we, as a community, can really grip some of the deficit in our nation, the fabric of our society, a lack of leadership in business. Morality is being challenged at the moment. Well, step up. It's yours for the taking. Let's go.
Johnny, thank you so much, mate. The final bit of the question is, what's the one bit of advice? But you've literally just covered it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I actually learned
And
it myself. Do your research. So when I started Campaign Force, my little not-for-profit, that it's still going as a campaign. I'm still doing my podcast, but I was trying to make it pay money to be sustainable. 5 years, hours, weeks, amount of time put into that. And I got a lot of value and built a network. But if I'd have done a bit more research and also went out solo, why on earth I went out solo? I was passionate about it, but actually build a team. We built a team from the off here, diversity of thought and opinion. And it was great. And it's been brilliant. I've learned a lot. But from the off, you can look at these things. Don't be so passionate you're blindsided yourself. Build a team. The fact that you're doing this as brothers is beautiful. I've got 2 brothers. Sadly, my late sister passed of cancer. But the family connection, that's a team, right? So do these things as teams. It'll be a lot easier.
I mean, Matt needs to pull his weight, mind.
Oh, thanks, mate. Do you know what I mean? Just about to close off. Listen, Jonny, thank you so much. I appreciate you're a very busy man. From myself and Paul, thank you. We can't wait to see where the Afghanistan veterans community goes, and maybe, hey, in the future, Paul and I will be at the cenotaph with our 𝐠𝐚𝐥𝐿 on, with our medals, marching with our brothers and sisters who we deployed with. So, thank you, Jonny, for potentially opening up the opportunity.
No worries, mate. When you're ready, we'll be there.